Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. This is our Publishing Institute keynote. I have with me Jessie Daniels, Dr. Jessie Daniels, and I am going to quickly give, sorry, I have too many windows open, doing this all over one machine. I'm going to quickly give an introduction, and she's going to talk to us. And then we are going to open up for Q&A if anyone has questions. Jessie Daniels goes by she, they, is a queer white race writer, professor, and researcher. She grew up in South Texas on land originally inhabited by the Karankawas and the place settlers called Corpus Christi, and now lives on Lenape land, known by settlers as Manhattan. Daniels works as a professor teaching sociology and applied digital sociology at Hunter College, CUNY, or City University of New York. One of her passions is teaching a course on sociology and memoir with a focus on the artful interiority in writing by African American, Latinx, and Asian American authors. She's also on the faculty at the Graduate Center CUNY, where she teaches writing for publication and has guided dozens of PhD students through the process of writing and completing their dissertations. Completing is important. So she is the author or editor of 6 books, including her most recent Nice White Ladies, which received coveted starred review from Kirkus and was included on her list of best nonfiction of 2021, which is amazing. Daniels is a research affiliate with the Harvard Berkman Klein Center and the Oxford Internet Institute. Outside the academy, Daniel has worked in the tech industry and at Rikers Island. Early in her career, investigating the far right, Daniels discovered that her paternal grandfather had been in the Klan, even as her father identified as Cherokee. He was not. This confusing family constellation proved to be a catalyst for a transformation that led her to spend the next decades excavating in many ways white supremacy and settler colonialism insinuated itself into her life, including a name change to interrupt her family's legacy and toward a kinship with those engaged in the joyful work of liberation. Her next book, Out to the Blue Water, a memoir about racism, patriarchy, madness, and a father's love, is currently out on submission to publishers. In the summer of 2024, Daniels collaborated with the Institute of the Critical Study of Zionism, where she is part of the founding collective, to co-create a 5-episode podcast series, The Trouble with White Feminism. And I'll share all these links with everyone too. The series explores the overlap between white supremacy, Zionism, can I say that today? And the ways some use feminism to deploy both. In 2025, she is launching a new podcast series, Skin in the Game, with Cassandra James, about how we talk about race and our stake in these conversations. Daniels is also an avid quad roller skater, a fan of house music, and anything else that includes a disco ball. So without further ado, welcome, Jessie Daniels.
Thank you so much to Misty for inviting me and for all of you showing up on a summer afternoon. It's really an honor to be here, and I'm just delighted. I'm going to say some remarks, and then I'm going to actually read a little bit from the memoir that is out on submission now. And I'll make that very short and then talk sort of about my trajectory as a writer. So I really identify as a creative writer, but as someone who has been hiding out in sociology, where I like to say there are a lot of words and none of them beautiful. In sociology, we're taught to write in a way that focuses on clarity and on building an argument. And so there's very little attention to prose at the level of the sentence or in terms of word choice. And so in sociology, and I think there are even memes about this now, we write in a style in which, you know, in every academic paper you write, there is a sentence somewhere that says, in this paper, I will argue that. And after a time, I grew quite weary of that sort of style of writing. And so I'll talk about my process to sort of honoring and respecting my creative writing desires and after I read from this. Okay, so this is just a short excerpt from Out to the Blue Water, a memoir that Misty mentioned. And it's a dual timeline. I'm not going to read both timelines. I'm just going to read the opening chapter. The book is divided into 3 sections. The first is called Friday, the second Saturday, Sunday, and the third is called Monday. And it's after a psych hospitalization that my father initiated for me. Okay, so the epigraph to the book is from Alice Walker. And Alice Walker writes, "We will turn our madness into flowers as a way of moving completely beyond all previous and current programming of how we must toe the familiar line of submission and fear, following orders given us by miserable souls who somehow have managed to almost completely control us. The madness, of course, for each one of us will have to be sorted out." Okay. So the epigraph for the Friday section, this first part, is from the Radical Lesbians Collective, circa 1970. And it reads, "A lesbian is the rage of all women condensed to the point of explosion. She is in a state of continual war with everything around her and usually with herself." Chapter 1, Like a Lady, Houston, 1995. Excuse me. "A dark-colored sedan pulls up in front of Kevin's house where I have been for the last week, mostly sleeping and not at all out of my mind. I sit up to get a better look at the car. I have spent today, like I have the last several, dozing off to episodes of Matlock from my brother's worn leather couch under the rusted vintage Dr. Pepper sign he's had since his pool cleaning days, and that now adds character to his West University Place bungalow. Fully awake, I grab the remote from the coffee table and turn off the television. 2 men exit the unmarked sedan. They are wearing short-sleeve shirts with ties that strain too close around their thick necks, handcuffs and pistols strapped to their even thicker waists. As they amble across my brother's front lawn, they look bored, as if this errand is part of an afternoon routine they are ready to cross off their to-do list. They must have the wrong address. One of them, I can't see which, knocks on the front door with loud conviction. I'll let them know they have the wrong address, wrong house, and go back to the mind-soothing balm of predictably solvable 1-hour mystery television. "Are you Miss Harper?" I should have pretended I wasn't here. "Yes." I skipped the part about changing my name. Staying at my brother's house means I'm Miss Harper, whether I want to be or not. "Who wants to know?" "Ma'am, we're U.S. Marshals and we're here to execute this warrant and take you into custody." I can barely make sense of what this man is saying. I feel myself staring at his lips, moving in slow motion under a giant brown mustache. "Now, are you going to go with us like a lady, Miss Harper, or are we going to have to use these handcuffs?" He gestures to his belt, the handcuffs and gun holstered there. The mind, in shock, fixates on tiny, insignificant details. Mine has locked on this, my location. How would the feds know to find me here, of all places? Who even knows I'm staying here? I consider slamming the door and running out the back and over the wooden fence, but I don't imagine this ends well, given the size of these two, their guns, and my lack of fence scaling ability. 33 years of nice white lady training are hard to undo, so I simply go with them and close the door behind me. I'm confused, but still certain this is some kind of mistake. As I walk to their car without the handcuffs, I see my father, JT, and his current wife, the French one, with her hair in that sloppy bun, not quite on top of her head, like a brunette Bridget Bardot, roll up in their used Mercedes. She stays in the car while JT, his dark hair shaggy and just a little gray at the temples, gets out to watch as the U.S. Marshals escort me to their car. "You did this?" I hurl the words, more accusation than question. "Sure as hell did." His calm expression covers the violence of what's happening. "Why? I wasn't doing anything." I hate that I, a grown-ass woman with a PhD, sound like a petulant teenager. I should never have come back to Texas. But when Kevin came to get me from St. Vincent's in New York, there was only one place we were going to come, and it was back here. "For your own good." He pauses for a second, then says, "You'll thank me for this someday." JT exudes a kind of satisfaction, like a rodeo cowboy who has roped and tied a calf in 7 seconds. I fucking doubt that, JT. I seriously fucking doubt that, is what goes through my mind as the marshals pull away in the sedan with me in the back seat and drive the 20 minutes to Juniper Hill Psychiatric Facility. That's the excerpt.
It's so powerful.
So I had the idea for this book pretty much immediately after the events that I described unfolded in 1995. In fact, that summer in 1995, I had an NEH summer seminar in New York with Nancy K. Miller, who is now a CUNY colleague of mine. But I didn't have the skill to write creatively in a way that met the sort of artistic aspirations that I had for myself. So what I did over the next many years was I did what I basically call a DIY MFA. So, and I did that do-it-yourself MFA through a series of courses, workshops, residencies, listening to podcasts and audiobooks about writing, sort of around the margins of my day job as a professor. And I'm happy to actually have a Substack newsletter, and I have a post on there called DIY MFA, and it has a lot of the resources about this and how you find those. And one of those residencies introduced me to Dismantle in Iceland, and it was a really enriching experience, and I learned a lot from being there. That summer, I was also, do you know what year it was? I don't remember.
T21, I know that because I just
Yeah.
looked it up.
Oh, okay. Huh, I thought it was earlier than that. That's interesting. Anyway, so this memoir, I have on my computer drafts going back to 2015. So I really sort of, when people ask me about it, I say sort of officially that I've been working on it for 10 years, just because those are the folders I have on my computer. But really it kind of started in 95 when I had that NEH seminar, but I absolutely didn't have the skills that I needed. So one of the pivotal moments for me was in 2015. I did a summer workshop at Aspen Summer Words and worked with a writer named Darren Strauss. And he's mostly known as a novelist, but he has a beautiful, gorgeous memoir called Half a Life that begins, "Half my life ago, I killed a girl." And it is the most interior memoir that I think I've ever read. And so I was very taken by that. And part of what I learned from Darren Strauss was really how to read creative works for craft, which was something that I didn't have before that. And I feel like that, gave jet fuel to my creative process after that, because then, even though I had already been reading memoirs sort of my whole life and enjoying them, I wasn't able to understand what they were doing with craft when I was reading them. So it was really like Darren gave me sort of just to continue mixing my metaphors, gave me tools to look under the hood, to sort of see how the engine was put together of craft. So that really set me on a path of understanding how to write. And then just through lots and lots of courses, I want to mention Anna Q, who wrote a lovely memoir called Made in China. And I took a course with her that was very helpful. And that was also when I was in Iceland. I was taking that course online with her through Catapult, RIP Catapult. And then it was 2018, I did a workshop at Tin House where I worked with Kiese Lehman. And I had a full draft of the memoir at that time, and he had some notes that it took me a really long time to sort of be able to address. And the other thing to say is that in addition to managing my day job, in 2018, my life blew up because I had a really messy divorce. And it took me a while to sort of get my feet back under me to be able to create after that. So anyway, so in the course that I teach on sociology and memoir, one of the things that we talk about a lot is sort of who is your audience. And there is a really interesting, I think, history of memoir writing that is woven together with the history of racial oppression and white supremacy in this country. So many people have pointed to Harriet Jacobs and Frederick Douglass as sort of the origin of a particular kind of memoir writing in the United States. And I really sort of put my work in that lineage because I'm very interested in the interiority of white supremacy and what it means to be raised in a family that identifies as white. Although it was very complicated with my father because, as Timothy mentioned, he identified as Cherokee, but he wasn't. Anyway, so it was very, I mean, I think it's like such a perfect setup for like, who becomes a race scholar? It's like this little girl who had a father who was both an ardent segregationist and identified as Cherokee. Yeah, so that's been part of the challenge for me in writing this, has been about figuring out who the audience is. And I think that in writing memoir, there's a way in which, you know, the tradition of, you know, Harriet Jacobs and Frederick Douglass, and if you wanted to continue it through to like Richard Wright, and so many others, there's a way in which they are writing for a white audience to sort of convey a certain amount of dignity and humanity, right? Sort of like see me as a person, right? And there's a way, Toni Morrison writes about how there's a way which she can read Frederick Douglass and know that he's pulling back, you know, because he's writing for a white audience. And so he'll say things like the atrocities, not his word, mine, the atrocities of slavery. And that's a way of sort of pulling a curtain over the worst realities of that system. So part of what I wanted to do really is in the tradition of Toni Morrison, who in Playing It in the Dark really calls on white writers to respond to the system of racial hierarchy and say, what's it like coming from within that system of racial hierarchy? So I'm going to just end officially talking about Morrison's quote about is art, should art be political or not? And she says there's this kind of language that the best art should not be political. And she goes on to say, but that's only true if you're talking about art, writing that becomes harangue. And she said the best art, the best writing is irrevocably beautiful and unquestionably political. And so that's really what I'm hoping to do with this writing. And I'm happy to answer any of your questions. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
You could start.
I guess I'll start with first. I just love Toni Morrison and everything that she says. And when you were mentioning Jacobs and Frederick Douglass, I was thinking there's a lot of writers, even Langston Hughes to a certain extent, and even James Baldwin, who wrote to a white audience, either purposely or not. But we often imagine that to be the reader, especially if we're talking about things like race oppression or the patriarchy written large. I think we still do that because we still assume that is going to be the reader a lot of times. I think a while ago I read like the statistic that the biggest readers out there are Black women. We still write to that white male audience. And we know, those of us who teach reading and writing, we know that that white male audience is actually falling off, and we have to try to bring those writers back. But I'm curious, like, how do your colleagues in sociology feel about you writing a memoir? Like,
yeah, it's interesting. It's not, we were talking earlier about how your work becomes legible in academic institutions. And I think that there really isn't a way that it becomes legible, but there's kind of the advantage of age and seniority. And so, I mean, I'm now 63, I'm tenured, and I'm a full professor. So kind of doesn't matter what they think, you know? So that's part of it. But I mean, I think that there have been sociologists who have written memoirs, including, Dalton Conley's Honky, which is still one of the best-selling sociology books out there. But I just think that they haven't done the work of sort of excavating what it means to be raised in a white family. There's still a way in which, and there's some others that I won't name, but there's still a way in which white writers talking about their own experience, gloss a lot of the realities of what it means to be white in this society. And they don't really grapple with, the subject position of being in a settler colonial nation. So that's part of what I hope to do in this.
Just to build off that to Misty a little bit, if you don't mind, I'm thinking about the end product. The memoir is different than the scholarly, monograph or whatever, but all about sociology informed the book. Right?
Exactly.
I mean, looking at society, right? Looking at society is really, it's just coming out in this very maybe more personal way.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that informed the book, but then did it also go backwards and inform your teaching? Was writing the memoir informing the teaching part of your job?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think, going back many decades as an undergraduate, I started out in the humanities. I was a triple major in English, history, and Spanish. Tell me you have family trauma without telling me you have family trauma. And there was a way in which I couldn't understand what was happening in the English and history classes because I simply didn't have the educational background or the cultural capital to really be able to understand. Like, I didn't understand symbolism. Like, I was like, scarlet letter, you mean red's important? I just didn't understand. But sociology really gave me an intellectual home, and it answered so many questions for me that was just crucial, that I really needed. And now, sort of after several decades in sociology, I'm sort of looping back to the humanities and coming back to the creative writing that I really wanted to do, but wasn't able to as a younger person.
Are there any questions?
Oh, and then I'm sorry, you asked about teaching.
Yeah.
So the class that Denise mentioned, the sociology of memoir class, is one at Hunter that's taught in our honors program, which is the Thomas Hunter honors program, and that feels like a really special gift to be able to teach that, because the students that come in there are some of the best ones that we have at Hunter College, and they're very curious about the world. And there's something about memoir that speaks to them, because I feel like the generation that's in college now, sort of traditional age, students are very sophisticated emotionally and very discerning in a way that my generation and others are not. So they very much are drawn to stories of interiority. Tell me what it's like in your world. Tell me what it feels like to be you. And I feel like sometimes the best sociology does that, but mostly we don't do that as a discipline. So to me, sociology of memoir is really a way into that interior landscape.
Questions from the rest of our audience?
Anyone out there?
Thank you so much for the presentation. It's not a question, it's more like a comment, thinking about what you are doing and the challenges that it represents from a sociological perspective to legitimize memoir, such a subjective view in an area that tries to be objective in so many ways. So kudos to you for doing that. I also was a sociology and Spanish my student when I was an undergrad. So I'm coming, I understand where you are coming from in a way. I teach Spanish in the humanities department. And I love the fact that you are taking this approach from a sociological perspective. I think that is humanizing in so many ways the sciences. So thank you.
Well, just on that point, thank you so much. I ended up, because of the way college credits work, I ended up being a sociology and Spanish double major. That was how I got out of undergrad. But to your point about, sociology being a supposedly objective social science, I was very fortunate to do a postdoctoral fellowship with Patricia Hill Collins, who wrote Black Feminist Thought. You know, and she has this thing about positionality, right? Like that there is no objective social science, that there's only the relationship of the researcher to the thing that you're studying. And that was actually that was really pivotal and shows up in the memoir, because it was when I was doing that postdoc that I wrote this preface to my first book, which is White Lies, which, by the way, is on my repository, so anybody can read the preface to it. But in that preface, you know, I had discovered while I was doing my dissertation that my grandfather, my father's father, had been in the Klan, and it, you know, most of my contemporaries, most white people I know who have made a similar discovery, deny it and bury it and kind of push it aside. And I couldn't let it go, partly because I was, you know, halfway through this dissertation on the Klan, like, now what do I do? This thing I'd been studying outside was now inside my family. And this was also the grandfather who had bothered me as a child. That's all I'll say about that here. And so Pat Collins really gave me a way to deal with that, right? Which was to write this preface where I disclosed my positionality in relation to the Klan. Like, I couldn't just say I'm an objective social science researcher. I had to say something about that and how it affected my family. That's the preface that I sent to my father, because naively I thought he would say, "Great job," you know, and give me a gold star or something. But instead, his response was to have me locked up in a psych ward.
I'm just like Patricia Hill Collins, and you're like, Pat Collins.
Just a human, like the rest of us, but an outstanding one.
Yeah. How do you see the difference between publishing academic work and creative work?
Yeah.
I'm too scared. I've been too scared all my life. Although people have asked me at conferences, do you want to publish this paper? I've never tried to publish anything academically. So can you talk about
Yeah, I mean, I think both involve a certain amount of risk and a certain amount of vulnerability, and a certain amount of performance. You know, I mean, none of what I've written is me, but it's a representation of me. I think that the academic work that I've done, you know, tries to be political, but I don't think it's necessarily, you know, it's not beautiful at the level of prose. The last book I did, Nice White Ladies, I'm pleased with, because it was, you know, you can do a lot of writing to avoid writing the other thing. So it was the book I wrote to avoid writing the memoir. But there are elements of Nice White Ladies that have memoir-ish parts in it. And I think of it, you know, whatever, in another life, took a sermon writing class once, and they talk about how to write a sermon where you have windows where you invite people in. And part of the windows of writing a sermon is, this is what happened to me. And so that's sort of how I used memoir writing in the Nice White Ladies book. And then sort of draw people into, right, so this happened to me, how do we understand that? And then do some writing that is secondary analysis, not my original research, but here's what the peer reviewed literature says, here's what journalism says, and then sort of make a conclusion about it. So, I mean, I think that I sort of see writing as how I come to understand things. I mean, it really is true that writing is thinking. And so for me, it was just very organic to use the writing to sort of help me understand my life and then figure out where it belongs in the world, you know, how to publish it.
Nellie? You have a question?
Hi, so thank you so much for the nice presentation. I missed part of it at the beginning because there was a lot of noise. I'm hoping you are able to hear me there.
Yes.
Yeah, so my question, I've been really working on my memoir for years, but to take it out, I don't know, for some reasons I've tried to reach out, but then at some point I'll lose motivation. I'm like, oh, maybe this is not really important and all that, and then I'll start working on it again. So my question to you, what is your advice to someone who wants to work on a memoir, and what is something that you wish you had known before you started writing your memoir?
Yeah, great question. I think my advice would be keep going, which is a thing that I often say to my graduate students. It's like, this is great, keep going. It's really, I think it's a really powerful experience as a human being to work on a long creative project where you're taking, painful, traumatic things that happen to you as an individual and transmute them, alchemize them into art, into something beautiful that someone else can benefit from. I really think that's the essence of who we are as human beings, that ability to take, what life hands us and turn it into art, and, however that happens. And then the question about what I wish I knew, I wish I had known, I wish I had understood earlier how to be a good reader. And I think reading is just the part of writing that so many people leave out. Like, I will often have students come up to me and say, I really want to be a writer. And I'm like, okay, what are you reading? And they're like, I don't read that much. It's like, well, these go together. So I think both understanding, I've always been a voracious reader, but I think that piece that Darren Strauss gave me of sort of how to understand how to read craft, I think that was the thing that I was missing and made such a huge difference for me. Because then when I read a memoir, I was like, oh, I see what you did there. Dual timeline. I just understood it a lot better. So that, I think that was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah. That's a
Just
big
a follow-up questions on the reading. Do you only focus on memoirs, or do you just read widely? Like, I think that's a good, like what you've said. I do read, but I don't think I read things like memoir. I read things that are in my field. So it's more of like reading articles, books related to my field, but reading fiction and other stuff, I'm not really good at it. So I'm wondering, like, when you say reading, is it just kind of like random, like everything, memoirs, whatever channel?
I try to read very, very widely, like across a lot of genres. But I also, there's this, I can't remember the poet's name. I think I'm not going to call it because I'll get it wrong, but there's a poet who says, keep good sentences in your ears. And so part of my reading practice is also listening to audiobooks. And those can be really helpful for things that I maybe don't have the patience to sit and read in written format. But if something is really good, it's really well written, and I listen to it, then I want the physical copy of it. So I just encourage reading across genres as much as possible. I will say though that I don't read as many novels as I used to, but I'm going on sabbatical, so maybe I'll read more novels on the sabbatical.
Jane Kenyon.
Yeah. Kenyon?
Yeah.
I was going to say Campion, and I was like, no, that's yeah, Jane Kenyon. Yeah.
And I know when I teach creative writing, especially an intro, but all my creative writing classes, part of my outcomes is to read like a writer. And there is a book I can borrow you, Nellie, that is reading like a writer, and also editing like a writer is another one.
Yep.
But I think it's a good skill to have. And for me, it's the opposite. I am very comfortable with reading fiction and poetry, not so much of any kind of nonfiction. And I recently learned about Libby. I don't know why I didn't know about it before. So I've been listening to nonfiction.
So say what it is so everybody knows.
Yeah, Libby is a library app. And we don't have it. Do we?
We are thinking of getting audiobooks.
Okay.
But if you live in Massachusetts, you have access to
Yeah.
through your public library. And I do the same thing. I do nonfiction
Right.
through audiobooks a
Uh-huh.
lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how, like, the Ancients Generation, when that book came out, I really wanted to listen or read it. And I was like, never gonna read it. I'm gonna get it from the library. It's gonna sit there, read the first chapter. And I listened to it in a couple of days. You can do that with fiction too. I have a hard time listening to fiction, but I know a lot of people love listening to fiction and
Yeah.
memoir.
I
So,
was just going to say also, I think it's really important when you are a writer to read what you've written out loud. And so for Nice White Ladies, I actually made sure that I did the audio narration for it. And a lot of people have told me that that is the way that they are able to enter that text. Like they couldn't sit and read it. It was too kind of activating for them.
okay, so you recorded the
Yeah.
audiobook?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we'll never.
Yeah. So, and I really enjoy that. And I also think it's very much part of the process, like there's like when you're writing creatively, as poets teach us, there's something sonic in the way that words sound and there's a musicality to it. And I think that really, you catch that when you're reading your own work aloud.
Yeah, yeah, I could, they hired an actress, 30, there's no way I was gonna, but I sound like Kermit the Frog.
It's actually my favorite part of the process.
Really? Okay.
It's great.
Any other questions? No other questions, really? Well,
You can ask me anything, really.
I don't bite. So, well, I talked a little bit about residencies. Can you talk, because I think you do more residencies than I do.
I've done, I don't have kids. But I also maybe done with residencies. I don't know. I mean, I did, what did I say? Aspen Words, Ten House, and Iceland. And and they have different, one of the things about residencies is sometimes there is didactic, there's a instructional component to it, right? You'll meet in the mornings with whoever your instructor is, and then in the afternoon you go work on your stuff or whatever. And then the Iceland one that we did was just here's time alone, work on your stuff. And what to say about residencies? I have enjoyed them. I have learned tremendously from them. And that was the one. I did one at Malay,
Oh, you didn't like.
which is in Western Mass, or whatever, on the New York Western Mass border. And it was lovely. I met wonderful people there. And I also had the sense while I was there, it's like, I don't actually need this anymore.
Yeah.
There was just like a point at which I was like, oh, I actually know what I need to do and I just need time and I don't, but there is a kind of support. And I think for people who are early in their sort of identity creation as a writer, like, am I really a writer? I think the residencies and the workshops are super important for that because they sort of solidify your identity. It's like, oh, I'm really a writer. I mean, the other thing that they do, I did the Ten House workshop and got to work with Jessie Daniels. And then he blurbed Nice White Ladies, which I was grateful for. And so it's also important for getting to know people, but can I say this out loud?
Yes.
My hope is that I will go back to them as an instructor at some point, rather than as a participant or attendee.
Of course, you can say that aloud. I kind of gotten that point, especially at workshops, that I feel like I don't need to do another writer's workshop.
Yeah.
Residencies are a little bit difficult.
Mhm.
I don't know, but yeah, you can go back as an instructor. I've been invited to some places, not to a residency yet. I don't know why. Come on, invite me. But maybe. But yeah.
I think COVID also interrupted a lot of that,
Yes, it did.
The other thing I'll say is that, to mention, I don't have kids, so it's like, what are you doing in a residency except going someplace where someone does all the, the care work, or you take a break from the care work. So it's very interesting to me that they're often oversubscribed by women because that's who's fleeing the care work,
Yeah.
but But the way that I have arranged my life, there's a library near me that's a subscription library. It's called the New York Society Library. And it's my in-town residency. That's where I go. And I can go there for an afternoon and it feels like I've spent 2 days working just because time is different there.
And you have a spouse. Are they in academia?
No, they're not in academia at all. No. They're just a lovely human.
Okay, so they respect your work and understand.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Jessie,
my
for doing
pleasure.
this, coming all the way here to do this. This, again, I will put this online and it will be on, and I'll share it with you too, of
Sure.
course. And thank you all for attending, and for those of us who attended the first session, thank you. And have a great rest of your summer. I'm here all summer, so you can always reach out to me. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot. Please send magic for the book to be bought. Thanks for clicking my email.
Do you have an agent?
Yes. With her now, so.